with the wisdom of two brilliant womanist scholars, Dr. Emily Towns and Dr. Katie Geneva Cannon. And so I am so excited, as my friend Dr. Perot would say, I am so excited, I am so excited that we're going to be able to journey together. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit how these webinars will work. It is a webinar, which means your camera and microphone are off, and that's perfectly fine. Your voice is the chat. So whether you are watching us on Zoom, or you are on Facebook, or you are on YouTube, I encourage you to chat. The chat is your microphone. When someone says something that resonates with you or moves you, hit that heart button, a thumbs up. We call that the Amen Corner. I want you to, type "I'm here." Let us know where you are calling in from, where you are tuning in from, so that we know you made it and we know that you're here. All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. Oh, welcome in, Dr. Bahuro. I see you on. Welcome in. All right, so here's what we're going to cover tonight. First, we're going to talk. We're going to start with what I like to call the Clark hook. The Clark hook. Dr. Clark has this powerful idea that America functions as an empire, and that empire uses religion as one of its main tools to keep people in line. And so we're going to unpack what that means. And then we're going to bring in Dr. Emily Towns. As I mentioned, she's a womanist ethicist, and she has this concept called cultural production of evil. Cultural production of evil. And it's going to resonate with you. If you stay with me, you're going to say, yep, I've seen it. I've seen it. And what Dr. Towns talks about is how empire does not just use laws to control people, but the empire uses images to control people. It creates pictures of who you are in their minds, and those pictures are designed to keep us where they can handle us, to hold us where they can handle us. And so after that, we're gonna put Clark and Towns together and see what happens when you combine these two ideas. Then at the end comes your turn. I'm going to put a question to you, and I want you to respond. This is where it's going to get personal and powerful for you. We're going to look at a couple of scriptures tonight. The first one we're going to look at is Genesis chapter 16, the story of Hagar. And we're going to look at a couple of other scriptures on tonight, and you'll be able to find those relatively easily as we go forward. So let's start with Dr. Clark. In his book, Invisible Institution and Empire, Clark asks us to think about America differently. He says America is not just a country, it is an empire. And when he says empire, he does not mean the government or the military. He's talking about the whole system, right? How the system works and shows up. A system that uses economics, politics, culture, and religion to assert that they are in power, or to assert this oppressive dominion. And so now here's the part that made me want to know more about what Clark says. Clark said that one of the main tools the empire uses is religion. One of the main tools the empire uses as religion. Think about that. Empire does not just use laws and policies and chains. It uses the Bible. Yesterday, they were the Ku Klux Klan. Today, they call themselves what? Christian nationalists, right? And so the empire will use theology to try to shape what people believe about God, so that those beliefs keep the oppressor with perceived power and keep everybody else believing that they have no power, right? And so I love what Dr. Clark does with his work here. I love how Dr. Clark makes it plain for us, and we can see it in the naming of the Ku Klux Klan and the naming of this so-called Christian nationalists, right? And so here's an example. During slavery, enslaved people were handed a version of Christianity that said, God, I put you here in these fields. This is your lot.
Now be a good servant. That theology was a tool the empire designed to oppress. But here is where it gets beautiful. Clark says that enslaved Africans were not fooled. They heard that theology on Sunday morning in the slaveholders' church, and then on Sunday night, in secret, out in the woods down by the creek, in what Clark calls the invisible institutions, they worshiped a different God, the God of freedom, the God of Exodus, the God who breaks chains. And so that is why this hush harbor that we are talking about and creating over these 4 weeks should resonate so well with you, because we got folks out here talking about their religion, and their religion is not like our religion. Those secret gatherings were prayer meetings, family, yes, but even more relevant to us today, they were the first acts of spiritual decolonization on American soil. Enslaved people said the God they are preaching to us is not the God we know. And in those hidden spaces, they found the real God, the God who sees them, the God who liberates them. And so Clark challenges us with a question that I want us to sit with tonight. And that is, if empire shaped our theology, if the system has been handing us a set of beliefs for over 400 years, then what do I really believe? How am I really practicing what I believe? What was I taught to believe? And what do I really believe? That's what we are wrestling with on this evening. And so Clark shows us the system, right? But Dr. Towns is going to show us the mindset that keeps the system running. And so Dr. Towns says this: the fantastic hegemonic imagination helps to maintain the status quo by producing images of the other that justify their marginalization. So what's she talking about? Let's make this real plain. What is she talking about? What Dr. Towns is saying here, hegemonic imagination, let's start with that. She's talking about the story that the people with perceived power tell about everybody else. It is the collective imagination of who is acting as a dominant culture, the pictures they create about who they say you are. And she uses the word fantastic on purpose. Not fantastic like wonderful. She's saying fantastic like fantasy. These images are made up. They are not real, but they feel real because we have been swimming in them our entire lives. And so I want to think about these images the empire has created. What you see on the screen, I went all the way with LBJ, didn't even know how to read that, was actually a license plate that was created during Lyndon Brandon Johnson's election, and was one that was sold and put on cars, right? And so think about the images the empire has created about Black women: the angry Black woman, the welfare queen, the Jezebel, the mammy, the images that have been created about Black men, Uncle Tom, Sambo. None of those are real people. They're characters, right? That the empire invented to justify trying to keep Black people, African people, people living in the diaspora from the African continent, to keep us in a certain place. And here's what makes Towns' work so important for us on tonight. She says empire does not just control people with laws and police. It controls with images that they try to get inside of our heads to make us see ourselves through the empire's eyes. This is why the images we see on the news and the ways in which we protest those images become so important. right? This is why the lack of positive images on the screen, whether we're watching a 30-minute sitcom or a 2.5 hour movie, that's why those images are so important, right? Because if the images, all of the images that you see of people that look like you are negative, it begins to shape a image in your head and in your spirit about what you begin to believe about yourself. And so if Clark shows us the system, the empire, and Town shows us the imagination that keeps the system running, empire builds the prison, right? The hegemonic imagination convinces us that we belong in the prison. But and here's the good news. The invisible institution was the first place these false images were torn down. That's the good news. We got a roadmap. The good news is, in those secret worship spaces, our ancestors said, "This is not who I am. Let me show you who God says I am." And that is exactly what we are going to be doing tonight and for the next 4 weeks. So here's what it all comes. Here's where it all comes together. What we have on the left is Clark, who gives us the system. He says empire is not just laws; it is a mindset. It shapes. We see God in ourselves and how we see each other. And empire tries to use religion to make oppression feel normal and even holy. At this point, I don't know about you, but nothing surprises me anymore when I watch the news. When I turn on the news, I'm expecting chaos. And I'm no longer shocked. It's become normalized to see racism and sexism and homophobia and transphobia and Islamophobia. Like it's become normal. And on the right, we have Towns, who gives us the imagination. She says empire creates characters, false pictures, stereotypes, labels, and these labels are designed to keep people marginalized. They're not descriptions of reality. They are tools used to control. And so we put them together. Empire builds a system and creates the imagination that justifies the system. So it's a double lock. We are oppressed by the structure and then taught to believe that we deserve oppression. And that's how deep this can go if we do not deconstruct it or come on home, as the outliers like to say. But here's the hope, and this is what I want you to hold on to. The invisible institution broke both locks. The invisible institution broke both locks. The invisible institution in those hush harbors, our ancestors rejected the system and the imagination. In those hush harbors, they said, "We are not who empire says we are. We are children of a liberating God." And family, we are about to do that same work of a family of a liberating God. So I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to be honest and feel free to drop your answers in the chat. Have you felt the need to find a hush harbor? Have you felt the need to find a hush harbor? I know that I have, and I'm wondering if you have too. So now I want to bring this a little bit out of the history books because I think it'll help us to see why this is so relevant today. Because what Clark and Towns describe, empire using systems and images to control Black people, that is not what just happened then. That happened this week. So let's walk through it a little bit. In 2013, the Supreme Court gutted the Voting Rights Act in a case called Shelby County versus Holder. Now, the Voting Rights Act was the crown jewel of the civil rights movement. It said that states with a history of racial discrimination, those states with a history of racial discrimination, and we know which states we are talking about, had to get federal approval before they could change their voting laws. That was called preclearance. It was there for a reason because every time Black people gained power at the ballot box, the system found new ways to take it away. And in 2013, the Supreme Court said, that was 40 years ago, things have changed. And Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, may she rest in peace, uh, wrote in her dissent, throwing out preclearance when it has worked is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you are not getting wet. She knew what was coming. Ruth said, Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, throwing out preclearance when it worked is like throwing away your umbrella in a rainstorm because you are not getting wet. And what came? In the 10 years since that decision, at least 29 states have passed 94 new laws making it harder for people of color to vote. Let me say that again. In the 10 years since that decision, 29 states have passed 94 new laws making it harder for people of color to vote. That is empire. Now, fast forward to 1 week ago, just 1 week ago, April 29th, the Supreme Court drops another bomb, Louisiana versus Callis. In a 6-3 ruling, they strike down Louisiana's 2 majority Black congressional districts and effectively gut Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. The last major tool we had to challenge discriminatory maps. Justice Kagan wrote in dissent that the ruling makes Section 2 all but a dead letter. So let me translate that. The one law that stopped politicians from drawing maps designed to silence Black voters, the Supreme Court just took away. And this is the same Louisiana, the same governor, remember that, same Louisiana, same governor we're going to come back to in Louisiana. But it gets more personal. Let me tell you about Calvin Duncan, if you don't know about Calvin Duncan. Calvin Duncan, this man was wrongfully convicted of murder. He spent 28 years locked up in Angola, the Louisiana State Penitentiary, which sits on a former slave plantation. Think about that. While he was there, he taught himself law. He became a legal scholar. He helped other justice impacted people with their cases. And when he was finally exonerated and released, he did not just go home and rest. He went to law school and then he ran for office. Last November, this brother, Calvin Duncan, ran for Orleans Parish Clerk of Criminal Court, and he won with a 68% of the vote. Not a close race. He won with 68% of the vote. The people of New Orleans said, this is our man. But the empire had what? Other plans. Governor Jeff Landry, same Jeff Landry connected to the voting rights case in the Republican-controlled Louisiana legislature, him and the legislature, they rushed to pass a bill, Senate Bill 256, to abolish Duncan's elected office days before he was scheduled to take office. They said it was about government efficiency. Government efficiency. Does that sound familiar? Sound like somebody else you know? That is the hegemonic imagination at work, using reasonable sounding language to cover up what is really happening. A federal judge did see right through it. A federal judge did rule the law was unconstitutional, saying the state had violated Duncan's federally protected constitutional rights due to due process and to vote. He called the state's justification likely pretextual, which is the judge's polite way of saying you ain't fooling nobody. But the higher court then stepped in. The Fifth Circuit stepped in and froze that ruling. And as of today, as of right now, we are as of this time that we are sitting here in Bible study, Calvin Duncan's fate is still being decided by the courts. He showed up to work on Monday. He got his keys, sat behind the desk, and within hours, they told him to leave. Family, this is what Clark means by empire. It is not just happening in history. This is what Towns means by hegemonic imagination. They will smile in your face and say efficiency while they erase your vote. Now, I want you to see the thread. Voting Rights Act gets gutted, 2013, opens the door. Louisiana versus Callis guts it further 1 week ago. That widens the door. And Calvin Duncan, that is what walks through the door when there's no protection left. A Black man wins by 68%, and the system says, oh, we'll just eliminate that off. That is the empire in 2026. Same spirit, different tools. But in this hush harbor space, in this space tonight, we see it, we're going to name it, and we're going to resist it. Now, let me take you to someone in scripture who did the same thing. Told you we're going to talk tonight about Genesis, but we're also going to talk a little bit about Esther this evening. So this is a familiar story. If you want to turn to Esther chapter 4, verse 14, you can. But you know the full story of Esther. But for those of you who may not know, let me quickly set the stage. Esther is a Jewish woman living in a Persian empire. And yes, I said empire on purpose. She has been made queen, but nobody in the palace knows that she is Jewish. She's passing, right? So she's passing, and she is surviving inside the empire by hiding who she really is. She has access, she has comfort, she has a title, but she is concealing her identity to stay alive. Meanwhile, a man named Haman, think of him as the empire's enforcer, think of him as the Jeff Landry of Persia, has convinced the king to sign a decree to destroy all the Jewish people, every man, every woman, every child. It is genocide signed into law and is dressed up in political language, just like Senate Bill 256 was dressed up in efficiency language. Esther's cousin, Mordecai, sends word to her, you have to speak up. You got to go to the king. You got to use your position. And Esther says, and I need you to hear this. Hear the fear in hear the trumpet, the fear in her voice. But if I go to the king without being summoned, I could be killed. Nobody goes to the king without being invited. Esther is weighing her comfort, and Esther is weighing her life. She has a position inside the palace. She could stay quiet. She could keep quiet. She could keep her head down in order to survive. But Mordecai sends back these words, and I need everybody to lean in. If you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the people will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish if you remain silent. And who knows but that you have come to your position for such a time as this. 3 words. I'm going to give you 3 words. 1, positioned with purpose. Positioned with purpose. Who knows but that you have come to your position for such a time as this? Mordecai tells Esther, you are not in the palace by accident. God put you there. Your position is not just for your comfort, it is for your assignment. You did not end up where you are by luck or coincidence. You are there because there is work to do that only you can do from where you stand. Calvin Duncan. This man spent 28 years in Angola, a prison built on a plantation, taught himself law behind those walls, fought for his freedom, won, went to law school, ran for office. The people of New Orleans chose him. That is positioning. That is not luck. Calvin was being prepared every time he wrote a legal brief. Every time he helped another person that was impacted by the justice system. And I want to talk to somebody tonight who is wondering, why am I here? Why did God put me in this job? These people are getting on my nerves. I can't stand seeing what's going on here. This neighborhood, this church, this situation. Maybe you are frustrated and maybe you are feeling overlooked. Maybe you are feeling like you are in the wrong place at the wrong time. Mordecai's answer is you may be positioned with purpose. Your placement is divine and it may be intentional. And so I ask you, in your frustration, as Dr. Danny pointed out recently, one of her mentors said creativity can come out of chaos. You may be positioned in that chaos because you have the right creativity to move the needle and push us forward. In our African spiritual understanding, we know that we do not walk alone. The ancestors have been positioning us. What the Yoruba tradition calls Ori, your divine head, your divine destiny has been guiding your steps. When you ended up where you are, that was not random. That was the spirit and the ancestors saying, we have been preparing you. Now is the time. You are your ancestors' wildest dreams. Esther was positioned in the palace. Our ancestors were positioned in the hush harbor. Calvin Duncan was positioned in the courtroom. And you are being positioned where you are right now, tonight, in this Bible study, in this community for such a time as this. Then we are pressed, beloved, to participate. Pressed to participate. Now, this is the uncomfortable part for all of us, and I need us to sit with it. Mordecai is pressing Esther, and there's some argument about that, and I have some argument with that. He is not giving her the option of neutrality. He is saying silence is a choice, and right now, it's not a choice that you can make. Esther could have stayed comfortable in the palace. She could have had food. She could have had security. She could have had a title. The decree to destroy her people was not going to affect her personally, at least not right away, not unless they caught her. She could have said, that's terrible, but what can I do? I'm just one person and it's too risky. But Mordecai says something that ought to make every one of us shift in our seats. If you remain silent, deliverance will come from somewhere else, but you and your father's house will perish. Meaning your silence will not protect you. You think you're safe because you have a position. You think the empire will leave you alone because you stayed quiet. They've shown us the empire is coming for us all. You cannot sit this one out. We have rested long enough on the ledge watching the fires burn, women. This is what's happening right now in our country. The Supreme Court guts the Voting Rights Act, and some of us stay silent. Louisiana abolishes a Black man's elected office, and some voters just shrug. Voter suppression is happening state after state. A woman in Indiana said she walked into the polls and there was a sheriff's officer standing at the door asking for ID. Since when? And some of us say, well, that's just politics. But Mordecai says your silence will not save you. If you stay quiet, God will find another way, but your purpose will go unfulfilled. And so I'm hoping that you will answer your assignment. That pressing that you feel tonight, that stirring in your spirit that says something has to change, that is not anxiety. That is your God, your ancestors pressing you to participate. What Calvin Duncan did when he ran for office? That was a man answering the pressing. What you do when you show up, that's you answering the pressing. The question is not whether you feel the press. The question is whether or not you will answer it. And then the third point that I have is promised a provision. Promised a provision. Relief and deliverance will arise. Now, here is the good news, and I save the best for last. Mordecai does not say deliverance might come. He does not say if we're lucky. He says, he does not say maybe one day it will come. He says deliverance will come. Will is certain. Deliverance will come. It is already on the way. The provision has already been made. The question is not whether deliverance is coming. The provision is promised. The question is whether you will be part of the story when it arrives. Think about the invisible institution. Our ancestors in the hush harbors who could not see freedom on the horizon. They did not have a timeline. They did not have a plan that made logical sense. But they believed in their bones and in their spirits, in the deep knowing passed down from ancestor to ancestor, from generation to generation, that deliverance was coming, that God had already made provision, and they were right. It took time, it took sacrifice, it took generations, but it came. And so I am believing that we will find the promised provision. I am believing that it will arise. In our tradition, we understand that the universe bends towards balance. The universe bends toward balance. The Akan people call Nyame, the supreme being, does not forget. The scales may tip for a while, but they always come back. The ancestors who poured libation in the hush harbor believe that. The mothers who sang spirituals in the fields believe that. And I pray that we believe that tonight. So let me bring this home. I want you to write down your 4 P's: positioned with purpose, pressed to participate. Silence is not an option for us. And promised a provision. Deliverance is coming. All right, family, we have covered a lot tonight. We named the empire. We saw how Towns describes the images that the empire creates. We brought it into the present, talking about the Voting Rights Act and Calvin Duncan. And we heard Mordecai say to Esther, "You are here for such a time as this. Now it's your turn." And here's the question that I ask you to sit with, to write in your journal, to answer in the chat. Clark says empire uses religion to control. Town says it uses images, labels, stereotypes, pictures designed to keep you in place. So my question is, what is one label or image that the world tries to put on you that your faith helps you to reject? What is one label or image that the world tries to put on you that your faith, your belief, your spiritual convictions help you to reject? Maybe it is angry. Maybe it is too old to make an impact or matter. Maybe it is not enough. Maybe it is second class. What is the label that the empire keeps trying to stick on you? Now I'd ask that you turn with me as we begin to ramp down to Genesis chapter 16, verses 7 through 13. So in this passage, Hagar is an enslaved Egyptian woman. She belongs to Sarah, Abraham's wife, and Sarah, who is supposed to be a woman of faith, uses Hagar. She gives Hagar to Abraham to produce a child, and then when Hagar gets pregnant, Sarah treats her uh, terribly, and Hagar runs into the wilderness. So here's Hagar, enslaved, used, thrown away. There was ever a person that the empire made invisible, it was Hagar. It was ever a person that the empire made invisible, it was Hagar. She was alone in the desert, and then God shows up. An angel finds Hagar by a spring of water in the wilderness, and God speaks to her. God sees her. God makes promises to her about her future and her son's future. And here is the part I need you to catch. Hagar does something that no one else in the Bible has done up to this point. She names God. She says, "You are El Roy," which means the God who sees me. She says, "I have now seen the one who sees me." The first person in all of Scripture to give God a name is not Abraham, is not Moses. But this African woman in the desert, a woman that the empire said did not matter, a woman that the system made invisible. And what does she call God? God, the God who sees me. Family, that is the spirituality of the invisible institution right there. And a system designed to make you invisible, and a system designed to make us shrink, and a system designed to make us believe that we do not matter. God says, I see you. God says, I know your name. The God of Hagar is the God of the hush harbor, the God who sees those whom the empire tries to erase. So, this is your last homework, and I really want you to sit with this week. Hagar named God. Now it is your turn to name yourself, not with the empire's label, but with God's label. And so, here's what I want you to do. I want you to write an I am statement. One declaration that defies the empire's labels. It could be I am worthy. It could be I am brilliant. It could be I am beloved. It could be I am enough. Whatever God says about you. Not what I say, what God says about you. Not what the empire says, what God says about you. Not what your family says, what God says about you. Not what your job says, what God says about you. And I want you to read that statement to yourself first thing when you wake up every morning. Not reach for your phone to see what's happening on the news, not get up to go and cook something. I want you to read or repeat that statement soon as you open your eyes, first thing in the morning. I am beloved. And that is your homework this week. I want you to know that you are powerful, you are beloved, you are a child of God. Those are identities that nobody can revoke, no empire can take from you. And when you declare that over yourself every morning and cover yourself in who God says you are, it will help you to navigate these yet to be United States and navigate that day a little bit stronger. I hope that today was helpful. Tonight we did a few things that I believe were powerful. We named the empire, not just the history in the history books, but the empire in the headlines. We saw Clark's framework come alive in the gutting of the Voting Rights Act, and in Calvin Duncan's story. And we learned from Towns that empire does not just use laws, it uses images, and why images are so important. We heard from Mordecai and Esther, and we also heard from Hagar, and Hagar has helped to equip us with a tool that will help us make it through the week. I hope that you will join us next week. Next week, we will be looking at the ethics of making a way out of no way. The ethics of making a way out of no way. I want to pause and see if I have any questions. Um,
Haven't seen any questions, Dr. Only. Only a few comments. Let me see. Of course, the pastor of New Hope said he was Dr. Katie Cannon's favorite student, had nothing to do with the class. And so I'm not sure what Dr. Mitchell is speaking of because he's lying to everyone. Um, I saw nothing on Facebook either, but I did want to highlight something
please.
that you stated that I think is extremely important. Um, when um, you started off talking about how we have inculcated and been infected sometimes with this type of religion, right?
Mhm,
And
mhm.
then you went through and explained and placed Clark and Towns in conversation, which was really good. Um, and in placing them in conversation, you moved us toward these affirmations at the end, which are actually revolutionary And one of the things that made me think about is how our internalized versions of Christianity that we were taught have taught us to say exactly the opposite of those things, right? We've been
Mm,
taught I'm supposed to be filthy rags and I'm supposed to be
mm,
bound. I'm supposed to be all of this type stuff. And, as you said, all of those things when they're, be careful what you say to yourself because yourself is listening, right? The very
mhm.
cells in your body are listening. And so then we start to act out of that as opposed to saying, I am enough. I am worthy
Yes.
of love. I am worthy of care. I'm worthy of concern. And so we talk about the revolutionary pieces that are needed to try to, shift and turn society. It's a start inside. And whereas Frank Thomas says it's an inside out, right? It's an inside job that works outward. So thank you for lifting that and for raising that and placing that, in conversation again with Clark and Towns, particularly around images,
Mhm.
um, images and ideas that infect us. I don't know another way to say it.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, no, I mean, you're hitting it right on the head. Like many of us were taught growing up in the Black church, and I say it with love, just as you did. Um, that to sing songs that um, that saved a wretch like me. And
Yeah,
Amazing Grace is a beautiful song, right?
yeah,
But
yeah.
why am I a wretch?
Why am I rich? That's right. That's right.
um, we
A
were
wretch
taught.
undone. Lord have mercy.
Right. Like, so am I created in the image of God or am I not?
That's right. That's right.
Right. And so that is always where I have struggled with such language and such songs because if you're telling me I'm fearfully and wonderfully made,
Mm-hmm.
not accidentally, not an afterthought, fearfully and wonderfully. If
Yep.
before I formed you in the womb, I knew you, God knew my name.
That's right.
Like then I can't those words don't make sense to me.
Yeah. That's right.
Being a
That's right.
filthy rag and being a wretch, right?
That's right.
And so
Yeah.
when we say I am worthy, it's not arrogance, right? And that's the other thing that we get caught up on, that this term humility,
Right.
right? And so when we say I am worthy, it is not being arrogant. You are speaking the language of God.
And
When you
and even when we use that word humility, we use it wrong
Yeah.
because the word I think in the Greek um, is a word when you talk about humility and what's the other one they use in the Beatitudes? Forgot the other word, but it's humility and something. But the word picture of it is a strong horse under control.
Mm,
That's the word picture. So
mhm.
humility ain't this, oh, I ain't nothing, oh, I ain't this, oh, I ain't that. No, absolutely not. Being humble is knowing your strength and being able to know when to use it, when not to use it, all that type stuff. It's a Naim Akbar, knowing thyself, right? The
Knowing
self that God
thyself.
has the self that God has created. Um,
Mhm.
and so all of these images and ideas that have infected us are extremely problematic. And watch this, we wind up preaching it out, and we become, black and brown preachers or white preachers in black and brown face that are doing the work of the empire against our own,
Come
right?
on.
So
Yes.
that's a whole nother study right there. Let me this your study. Let
No,
me.
no,
But,
no.
but,
I wanted, no, this is
well,
good. This is good.
here's the thing. A couple comments in the chat. Dr. Mitchell, who is absolutely not Dr. Cannon's favorite student, but Dr. Mitchell says the images of a European Jesus, blonde hair and blue eyes, right? Which is
Mm,
really Michelangelo's nephew or something like that. It ain't, hair like lamb's wool, feet like burnished brass. Then Sister Sharon says, in expressing an opinion and speaking truth to knowledge that is not aligned with the empire as a black woman, the empire labels me as angry or
angry.
drastically indifferent. And
Mhm.
here's her affirmation statement: I am worthy and capable of speaking that which I know and believe. I am who God says I am. I think those are absolutely awesome, um, awesome observances for this evening. But thank you, Dr. Only, for the time and the space. Let me look on Facebook and see if there are any
Okay.
other.
Reverend Joyce, I see you out there. Welcome in.
Yeah, no real pieces on Facebook, but this has been very helpful. I think this is particularly in the times in which we live. These are the types of theological, sociological, ecclesiological, all of those type of logicals, types of conversations we have to be having as we are literally fighting
Yes.
for our lives and for lives of our children and those coming behind us. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I look forward to seeing you all next week and invite some folks to come along with you. I think it's important that we understand this text that we're reading by Dr. Clark and our biblical text in the context of what we are facing today so that we are well equipped
Absolutely.
and we are shored up on all sides.
Because here's the other
Um,
piece. Here's the other piece of that. I'm sorry. It's just
no, go ahead.
the other piece of it is um, the other side is using theology, sociology, all of these different types of pieces to discredit, destroy. All. Did you know that I read this the other day. The I guess head of the Heritage Foundation got a PhD in African American studies
Hmm.
and used that to dismantle and to write Project 2025.
Hmm.
Study stuff we don't even study of ourselves.
Hmm.
So if we don't have a revolutionary theology, sociology, anthropology, um, we're gonna get trampled, and our children's children are gonna ask, "What was y'all doing?" Right?
Yeah.
Um, Joe says the Secretary of War is quoting Bible every day to endorse the war with Iran.
Hmm.
There's got to be an alternative witness and a prophetic postuling that goes against this and does not accept it.
And so if you think so, yes, the empire is strategic, right? And so um the president of the Heritage Foundation, I think his name is Roberts. Um he was one of the folks in the think tank that wrote what was necessary to dismantle the Voting Rights Act and public education and civil rights protection.
Yep.
So he was the author of uh, he was intentional about making sure he learned about who he saw as his enemy.
Yep. 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 Yep.
He wrote his master's thesis on Western African extended kinship patterns among enslaved people in Virginia.
Lord have
He
mercy.
wrote his doctoral dissertation on enslaved people in what state? Louisiana.
Louisiana. Yep. Yep.
If you don't think that all of this stuff is tied together, that's not a conspiracy theory. It's right. It's in the black and
In
white.
your face. It's in your face.
This man studied the US. He studied us. He studied our families. He studied how we survive. He studied the very strategies our ancestors used to maintain community under oppression, the same strategies that Clark writes about in the Invisible Institution. And he took that knowledge and went to work to dismantle every protection we have.
And so watch this. What you're doing and what we're doing in these 4 weeks and otherwise are semi-virtual hush harbors,
Mhm.
but the real hush harbors that have to take place
Mhm.
cannot be virtual. They
They
have to be
cannot.
they have to be in our various locales because
Yes.
that's how our ancestors, if we talk about Sankofa moments, that's how our ancestors theologically, sociologically, I keep going back to all these pieces, anthropologically, that's how they planned revolts.
Yep.
That's how they planned community. You think about the Maroons,
Mhm.
right? That's how they planned their societies
Mhm.
because they were doing this. kind of stuff. So we can give some of this, but I think each of these churches have and are maroon communities
Hmm.
that are trying to um, save us.
So Dr. Williams, you bring up a good point, and this is not a browbeating of a go back to church if you watch online.
That's
It
not
is
at all.
it is a calling in, not a calling out.
That's
It
right.
is a calling in to say there are some things we're not going to be able to say as directly as we need to say on these here virtual interwebs. Now I'm already on somebody's list. Okay, so that it ain't about me being on somebody's list. It's about there are some things that we're not going to be able to say on here. So that's why being in community and in fellowship is important, because if the empire is studying us, then we need to be studying the empire right back. And that is what our ancestors did, right? So in order to build the underground railroads, the empires had to be studied. In order to know how to escape, we needed to know when they slept, when they went to church. We needed to study the empire. And they are using the same model. And guess what? We have a model too. If empire is studying us, we need to be studying the empire. And that's the counterintelligence, right?
Yeah.
And when we gather in this Bible study and name the system, we can come here and we can name the system, and then we have to go to our hush harbors and build the systems that serve us.
That's what I was. That's you took the words out of my mouth because yes, you can study them, right? Too often, many of us have studied them to try to be them,
That
and we don't want to. And we don't want to really be free. We want to replace power, right? As
right,
opposed to leaning in. I think what's the research method? It's a research method. But instead of leaning into who it is that we are, and by doing that, automatically, canceling out others' ethics, all of those types of pieces. We don't bring, alien ethics into an authentic space.
right,
You know how they thinking, but we can't. We got to be us.
right,
Right?
right.
So I think those are important again, and all of those pieces, theologically, sociologically, all of those different ways,
Anthropologically,
anthropologically, all of that.
absolutely,
I think that's the way.
absolutely.
This is great, Ed. Great
Well,
job.
I look forward to seeing you all next week. We will continue our conversation. If you haven't gotten the book already, it is available on Amazon. Invisible Institutions by Dr. Kurt Clark, um, uh, uh, STVU graduate, if I may celebrate that.
Mhm.
And so it is. It. I was glad to have picked it up and read it on the plane, and couldn't wait to share it with y'all this May. So I look forward to seeing you all next week.
Take care, everybody. God bless.
God bless.
Uh,